Good morning and welcome to Rose Red Homestead. Thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate that. We especially appreciate it when you like our videos, if you do, and then share them. We are very anxious to get the good word out about safety and food preparation. We talk a lot in our videos about food security and self-reliance and emergency preparedness. And today we're going to talk about sun-dried tomatoes. And just that name sparks such excitement within me. I love Italy. I love the concept of Italy. I have never been there. It's been in my dreams. I even went so far as to look up real estate, 5 years ago in Tuscany. But that's not ever going to happen. And sun-dried tomatoes bring to me the mental image of fields of tomatoes with long rows of screened trays, tomatoes cut in half, out drying in the sun, and just having that Italian flavor to it. You know, I'm reminded of a poem by Anne Campbell that I have loved for a really long time. I made the choice early on to have a family. I have 6 children, and Anne Campbell has written a poem that speaks to my heart. It is called "To My Child." You are the trip I did not take. You are the pearls I did not buy. You are my blue Italian lake. You are my piece of foreign sky. And in a heartbeat, I would trade world travels for having my family. And that's kind of what that poem means, although I still dream a little bit about Italy. But we're going to do some Italian stuff today by showing you how to do sun-dried tomatoes when we come right back. Sun-dried tomatoes, there are lots and lots of ways to do them if you have ever looked on the internet. And I don't think that there's one right way how to do it. There is more of a traditional Italian way, which is what we are going to do. You can really use any tomato, but we're going to use Romas. And with sun-dried tomatoes, you don't have to dry them out in the sun. Many people in many parts of the world could never do that because of the insect populations that are so prevalent, the high humidity. If you live in a dry desert climate where you can count on several days of heat and sunshine, it would be okay. But even though we probably qualify for that, I would not do them outside. So you have a couple of other alternatives. You can either use your dehydrator or your oven. I'm going to show you what our first attempt looked like when we tried to do it in our oven. So all of the instructions say to set your oven at 200 degrees. Now this is what they look like at 200 degrees. They're horrible. And they're not even done. They're still squishy in the middle. And this is after 23 hours. So I'm not going to choose to do them in the oven. Another practice that we did with Roma tomatoes actually turned out much better, and this was in my dehydrator. These kept their color. Now I haven't done the final step in processing, which will make these a little softer. As you can tell, they're pretty crisp, but these kept their color better and will be much better when we get to the point where we're going to be putting them in oil. So let me sort of explain to you what we're going to do. I have these lovely Roma tomatoes that Jim picked up from the grocery store for me. I was hoping to be able to do it with our own crop of tomatoes, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. So sun-dried tomatoes are different from other ways of dehydrating, and we are going to use the dehydrator. In that we don't slice them, rather we're going to cut them right in half. And then we place them cut side up with some air spaces in between on the tray. And then we will dehydrate them this way. And I'm going to sprinkle them with salt in just a moment. This salt is not only for flavor, but it also helps the drying time speed along quite a bit. And once these are done, then I have some special things to show you about how we're going to pack them in olive oil with some spices. But there's a special way to do this. So if you're skipping through the video, don't miss the part where we're putting them in oil, because there are some safety issues with sun-dried tomatoes if you do the wrong type of spices and ingredients. And notice that I'm not cutting the stem end out. Everything I looked at and everything I read said don't do that. Once these are on the tray, then I'm just going to lightly sprinkle with salt. And this is sea salt. And when they do this outside, I buy this brand because it does not have the declumping chemical in it, and which means it clumps up a little bit, but that's fine, less chemicals. When they do these out in the fields, in the sun, the salt helps prevent mold and mildew as well. So it serves that purpose if you are going to be doing them outside. And I'll finish doing the rest of these off camera. We'll get these in the dehydrator, and then we will come back. There are so many wonderful uses for sun-dried tomatoes, and it's such a lovely thing to have on our food storage shelves for use in times of emergency. It is a little bit of a fancy food and would help our morale as well as our taste buds. So we will be back when these are out of the dehydrator. It is now 2 days later. It took the better part of 2 days to get these done, but look how beautiful they turned out. I am so pleased with these. They held their color, and they're nice and, well, kind of crispy, I guess you'd say. They're a little bit leathery. The thing about doing these, and it takes so long because they're so thick, and the way that you know that they are done is when you can pinch them and then wiggle your finger and thumb back and forth, and if it's squishy, if things move around in there, then they're not done. So you want them completely dry. Now, believe it or not, the next step is to hydrate them a little bit. It would not have worked to just partially dehydrate them. They have to be completely dehydrated, and then we're going to put them in boiling water for 2 minutes. I have over on the stove 2 quarts of water and 1 cup of vinegar, and we're going to boil these for 2 minutes. And the reason that we do that is they need to be softened up just a little bit. We do not want sun-dried tomatoes that are so hard to bite in they're going to break a tooth. So we're going to rehydrate them a little bit, and then the vinegar is going to acidify them just a little bit. Then we'll bring them back over here. I'm going to put them out on this towel. There's a little rack underneath, and we'll blot them dry, and then we will start packing them in these weck jars, and I will show you what spices I'm going to use. Then we're going to cover the whole thing with a little bit of warm olive oil, and I'll tell you about the precautions to avoid botulism. So I'm going to head over there and get the boiling started. Jim will come over and take a picture of the tomatoes while they are boiling in that vinegar water. So we'll be back here in just a minute. I'm going to put about half of these in at a time. That vinegar is pungent. Hey Siri, set timer for 2 minutes. Hey, just right on time. Okay, here they are, all blotted, and oh, they just look really nice. So I want to just drop one, no clink at all. And so now look, they're nice and leathery. You can bite into these without breaking a tooth. And I know that some of you are going to think, well, why can't we just partially dehydrate them until they get to this stage on the way to getting hard, and then we wouldn't have to do the boiling step. the thing of it is, these do not dehydrate evenly. And so you would have some parts that were still squishy, which means there was too much water still left in them, and some that were completely dehydrated. So it works best to dehydrate everything all the way through. And our goal is, of course, to get it down to only about 10% moisture on the inside. And then we just boil them to make them nice and leathery and soft again. So this is the traditional way that it is done, and so that's what I decided to follow. Okay, so now I'm going to be putting them into this weck jar. Now, we don't can these at all. They're going to be in oil, and a lot of people think that when you just put things in oil, that is a way of preserving them, because botulism cannot grow in oil, and that's true, it can't. So that's not an issue, but here is the issue. We are going to be flavoring these a little bit. So in this little bowl, I have some basil, thyme, and oregano. Now these are completely dried. Less than 10% moisture, so we are okay. We cannot put anything in here that is fresh and expect it to stay completely clear of botulism. So anything that we put in here, we want to have dried. If you want to use fresh garlic instead of what I'm going to use, which is this minced garlic, which is just completely dried, then you have to put this in your refrigerator when we're all done and use it in 4 days. If you want it to be good for several weeks, even up to about 4 months, to prevent botulism, then we do it the way that I'm going to demonstrate, which is all dried ingredients. And so I'm just going to take some of these spices and sprinkle them around right there, and a few little chips of garlic, and slip in there, and then another layer. 2 or 3 or 4 layers. And then when we're done, these can sit out on the counter. You don't want to eat these right away because we want these flavors to develop. And that takes a couple of weeks, really. I mean, we may not be able to wait that long, but nevertheless. So keep building up these layers and then adding the spices and the garlic. And these look so beautiful in the jar. Okay, second to the last layer. And the garlic. Oops, I maybe went overboard on the garlic there. Jim and I are not big garlic eaters, but should be great. Okay, so this is about it. And then we'll do the last spice and the last garlic. And now we're going to fill this with EVOO, extra virgin olive oil, that I have heated. It's not super hot. It probably is at about 100 degrees. The reason that we want to warm the olive oil is so that it helps move the seasonings into the tomatoes themselves. And we just bring that olive oil right up to the top. All the tomatoes should be submerged in the olive oil. And just like with regular canning, we want to release any air bubbles. And then I want to push these down so that they are submerged. I need to add a little bit more olive oil. And now we'll put the lid on. And because all of these ingredients are dry, this is good to sit out on my counter for up to 4 months. So isn't that just beautiful? So we'll let these flavors develop, and then what do you use this for anyway? And the answer is anything you want. It adds such a pop of flavor to scrambled eggs, to fish, to chicken, to even soups and stews or whatever you would like to do. And so I'm going to finish filling these jars, and then we'll bring you back when we have all of it done. Basil, oregano, and thyme were the 3 spices that I put into this little bowl. I put a teaspoon of each one so that there were equal quantities, and I have probably a little more than a teaspoon left, so it didn't take all of them. Each one of these jars is just a little bit over 1 cup in volume, and it took about a half a cup of olive oil to do each one. So we got 3 jars and a little more than half with our tomatoes. Now, just a couple of words about botulism and why we want to use dry ingredients if we are not going to refrigerate it. There is a slight, and it is slight, but nevertheless, we know a little bit about probabilities because we've talked about that quite a bit in some of our other videos, chance that botulism can form in oil if you do some kind of an infusion with something that is not dehydrated. So you never want to use fresh herbs because their water content is higher. Now, it is true that botulism cannot grow in oil. So if all you want to do is put oil in here, you're good. But if you want this extra flavoring, either use completely dried, dehydrated spices and garlic, or keep them in your refrigerator. Here's the reason why. Botulism requires low acid, low or no oxygen, moisture, and temperature that is about the temperature of our pantry or right here in my kitchen. And so while botulism cannot grow in the oil, it can grow wherever there is moisture. And by moisture, I mean water moisture, not oil moisture. Now, we have also done a video on honey infusions. The same thing applies. You don't ever put fresh herbs or fresh anything in honey, because that danger also exists there. And this is from the extension offices in the USDA. So these are all okay to sit out until the flavors develop. And if you want to just be extra safe, you can go ahead and just refrigerate these as well. I'm going to leave mine out for a couple of weeks so that they can develop a good flavor. And after they have developed that flavor, I may just keep them, or because I want these to last a longer time, I may put the one that we're not using. We'll start with this partial one, of course, but I may put the others in the refrigerator so that it will keep a long time. So this is a fun activity to make sun-dried tomatoes, especially if you have a wonderful tomato crop this year, which my hope, my wish for all of you who have gardens is to have a fabulous tomato crop. If we have a decent crop, I'm also going to do some more tomato videos as well. But that's it for sun-dried tomatoes. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.